35,000 feet above the Atlantic. And Matthew had never felt more terrified. His 6-month-old son, William, was screaming. That piercing, relentless kind of cry that turns heads and hardens faces. Sweat pooled at the base of Matthew's neck, his vision blurred. Every single person in rows 15 through 22 was staring, whispering, their judgment thick enough to choke on. An elderly man 2 seats up turned around with a scowl that could curdle milk. A flight attendant was making her way down the aisle, that practiced sympathy on her face that meant, "You're about to be asked to do something." Matthew bounced William desperately, his arms aching, his throat tight with shame. "Please, buddy, please stop. Daddy doesn't know what to do." Then the woman beside him moved. Elena. She'd been silent the entire flight, hadn't even made eye contact during boarding. But now she reached into her purse, pulled something out, and pressed it into Matthew's hand. He looked down, and his blood ran cold, because what she gave him should have been impossible. What she gave him was a bracelet, William's bracelet, the one Matthew's wife had been buried with 3 weeks ago. The flight from London to Toronto was supposed to be a fresh start. Matthew had booked it 2 months in advance, back when Sarah was still alive, back when they'd planned this move together. A new job, a new city, a new chapter for their little family. But Sarah never made it to the airport. Stage 4 cancer doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care that you have a 6-month-old son who needs his mother. It doesn't care that you promised each other you'd grow old together. Sarah had held on longer than the doctors predicted. Long enough to see William smile for the first time. Long enough to record voice memos on Matthew's phone, dozens of them. Messages for William's first day of school, his graduation, his wedding. "Just in case," she'd whispered, though they both knew there was no just in case about it. She'd slipped away on a Tuesday morning while Matthew was in the kitchen making coffee. He'd come back to the bedroom with 2 mugs, and she was gone. Just like that. No final words, no goodbye. Just the silence of a heart that had finally stopped fighting. They'd buried her with the bracelet. It was a simple thing, silver with a small charm, a tiny W for William. Matthew had given it to her the day William was born, and she'd never taken it off. Not once. Not even in the hospital when her wrists had become so thin the bracelet spun loose around the bone. At the funeral, Matthew had kissed her forehead one last time and made sure the bracelet was still there on her left wrist before they closed the casket. He'd watched them lower her into the ground. He'd thrown a handful of dirt onto the polished wood. He'd driven home alone with William crying in the back seat, and he'd known with absolute certainty that the bracelet was 6 feet underground in a cemetery in Manchester. Yet here it was. Cool metal against his palm, the weight of it familiar and wrong, the tiny W charm catching the overhead light. Matthew's hands started shaking. He looked at the woman beside him. Elena. That's what her boarding pass had said when she'd squeezed past him to the window seat. She was probably in her early 60s, with gray hair cut short and elegant, wearing a navy cardigan and pearl earrings. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked kind. She looked absolutely terrifying. "Where did you get this?" Matthew's voice came out strangled. Elena didn't answer immediately. She was looking at William, who had impossibly stopped crying. The baby was staring at the bracelet in Matthew's hand, his face calm, his breathing steady, his tiny fingers reached out, grasping at the air. "He recognizes it," Elena said softly. "Of course he does. She wore it every day of his life. That's not possible. This bracelet it's buried. I watched them. I was there." Matthew's voice was rising. A few passengers glanced over. He didn't care. I need you to tell me where you got this, right now." Elena turned to look at him fully for the first time. Her eyes were pale blue, the kind that seemed to see too much. "I know you're frightened, Matthew. I know this doesn't make sense, but I need you to trust me for just a moment. Put the bracelet on William's wrist." "Are you insane? I don't even know who you are. How do you know my name?" "It's on your boarding pass. I can see it from here." Elena's voice was patient, like she was explaining something simple to a child. "And I know you're scared, but your son stopped crying the moment you touched that bracelet. Don't you want to know why?" Matthew looked down at William. The baby was perfectly calm now, his eyes fixed on the silver band in Matthew's hand. No tears, no fussing, just that intense focus that babies sometimes have, like they're seeing something adults can't. Matthew's mind was racing. This was impossible, completely impossible. Someone had robbed Sarah's grave. That was the only explanation. This woman had somehow obtained the bracelet, and now she's, playing some sick game? Trying to scam him? But why? What could she possibly want? "I'm going to call the flight attendant, and then I'm going to have you arrested when we land." "You could do that," Elena agreed. "You absolutely could. But first, let me ask you something. When did William last sleep through the night? When did he last sleep more than 2 hours at a time? When did he last go more than 30 minutes without crying? When did you last feel like you could breathe without your chest caving in?" Elena's voice was gentle, but every word hit like a hammer. "You haven't slept in 3 weeks. You can barely remember to eat. You're running on coffee and grief and the terror that you're failing your son every single day. Am I wrong?" Matthew felt something crack inside him. No, she wasn't wrong. William had been inconsolable since Sarah died, screaming for hours, refusing bottles, refusing sleep. He'd taken him to 3 different doctors. They'd all said the same thing. Babies can sense stress. Give it time. Be patient. But patience didn't help at 3 a.m. when William was shrieking and Matthew was so exhausted he could barely stand. Patience didn't help when he looked at his son and saw Sarah's eyes staring back at him and felt the crushing weight of doing this alone. "Put the bracelet on him," Elena said again. "Just for a minute. If I'm wrong, if nothing happens, then yes, call the flight attendant. Have me arrested. I'll go quietly. But if I'm right—" She paused. "If I'm right, then your son is going to sleep for the first time in 3 weeks, and you're going to get 1 moment of peace. Don't you think you both deserve that?" Matthew looked at the bracelet. He looked at William. He looked at this stranger who somehow knew things she shouldn't know, who had something she shouldn't have. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to call for help, but the exhausted, desperate part, the part that would do anything to stop his son's suffering, that part won. His hands trembling, Matthew fastened the bracelet around William's tiny wrist. It was too big, of course, meant for an adult. It slid down to his elbow. But the moment the clasp clicked shut, William let out a long, shuddering sigh. His eyes fluttered closed, and just like that, he was asleep. Matthew stared. He'd been trying to get William to sleep for 6 hours. 6 hours of bouncing, rocking, singing, pleading. Nothing had worked. But now, with the bracelet on his arm, William was out cold. His breathing deep and even, his face peaceful. "What did you do?" Matthew whispered. "I didn't do anything," Elena said. "The bracelet did. Or rather, what the bracelet represents. That's not an answer." "No, I suppose it isn't." Elena settled back in her seat, her hands folded in her lap. "My name is Elena Hartley. I'm a hospice nurse. I've been working in palliative care for 37 years. I've sat with hundreds of people as they died, held their hands, listened to their fears, their regrets, their last words." She paused. 3 weeks ago, I sat with a woman named Sarah. Your Sarah." Matthew's world tilted.
You were there? At the hospital? Not at the hospital. She'd chosen to die at home. You'd gone to make coffee. She was alone. Or she thought she was. I was in the next room, finishing up with another patient. Elena's voice was soft. She called out, not loud, just a whisper. I went to her, and she asked me for help. What kind of help? She was terrified, Matthew. Not of dying. She'd made peace with that. She was terrified that William wouldn't remember her, that he was too young, that he'd grow up with no connection to her at all. She kept saying, he won't know me. He won't know how much I loved him. Matthew's throat closed up. He'd had that exact thought 100 times. William was only 6 months old. He'd have no memories of Sarah, no recollection of her voice, her smell, her touch. He'd grow up knowing his mother only through photographs and stories. It was one of the cruelties that kept Matthew awake at night. What did you tell her? He managed. I told her the truth, that love leaves a mark, that babies remember more than we think, that even if William couldn't recall her face, he'd carry her in other ways, in his sense of safety, in his capacity for joy, in the way he'd learned to trust the world because she'd held him with such tenderness. Elena's eyes were distant, remembering. But she wasn't satisfied with that. She wanted something concrete, something he could hold on to. She looked at the bracelet on her wrist, and she said, "This! I want him to have this! But Matthew won't. He'll bury me with it. He'll think that's what I want." "It was what you wanted," Matthew protested. "You never took it off. You loved that bracelet." She did love it, but she loved William more. And in that moment she wanted him to have a piece of her he could touch, something real. Elena turned to look at Matthew. "She asked me to take it. After you left the room, after she was gone, she made me promise I'd find a way to give it to William." Matthew's mind was reeling. That's theft. You stole from a dead woman." "I kept a promise to a dying woman. There's a difference." "Is there?" Matthew's voice was sharp. "You let me bury my wife thinking she was wearing that bracelet. You let me stand at her grave. Do you have any idea I thought I was honoring her." "You were honoring her. You are honoring her." Elena's voice was firm. "You're raising her son. You're doing it alone. And you're terrified, and you're exhausted, but you're doing it. That's how you honor her. Not with jewelry in a coffin, with love for the child you made together." Matthew wanted to argue, wanted to be angry, but William was asleep. For the first time in 3 weeks, his son was truly, deeply asleep, and Matthew couldn't ignore that. "How did you find me?" he asked finally. "I didn't. Not really. I knew from Sarah that you were planning to move to Toronto. I knew the approximate time frame. I've been taking this flight every week for the past 3 weeks, hoping I'd see you." Elena smiled slightly. "Today was going to be my last attempt. I'd decided if you weren't on this flight, I'd mail the bracelet to you and hope it arrived safely." "That's insane," Matthew said, but there was no heat in it. "You've been flying back and forth for 3 weeks just to give me a bracelet?" "To keep a promise," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the plane hummed with the usual sounds of air travel, the rustle of magazines, the ding of call buttons, the murmur of conversations. But in their row, there was only the sound of William's peaceful breathing. She was scared. At the end, she held my hand so tight I thought she'd break bones. And she said, "Tell Matthew I'm sorry. Tell him I fought as hard as I could. Tell him he's going to be an amazing father." Matthew felt tears burning behind his eyes. Did she say anything else?" Elena hesitated. Then she reached into her purse again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wrote you a letter. She asked me to give it to you along with the bracelet, but she said only when the time was right, when you were ready to hear it. I want to read it now." "I don't think you do. That's not your decision to make." Elena studied him for a long moment. Then she handed over the letter. "All right. But Matthew, whatever she wrote it with love. Remember that." Matthew unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Sarah's handwriting. He'd recognize it anywhere. slightly slanted, the letters looping and graceful. He'd seen it on grocery lists and birthday cards and notes stuck to the refrigerator. Seeing it now felt like being stabbed. The letter read, "My darling Matthew, if you're reading this, then Elena found you. Good. I was worried she wouldn't. I was worried you'd be angry about the bracelet. Maybe you are. That's okay. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. But I need you to know why I did this. William is so small, and I'm leaving him so soon. I won't be there for his first steps or his first words or his first day at school. I won't be there to kiss his scraped knees or chase away his nightmares or tell him he's loved on the days when he feels unlovable. But I need him to have something of me, something he can touch and hold and keep. The bracelet was always his anyway. That W was always for William. I just got to borrow it for a little while. I'm not going to tell you to be strong or to move on or to find happiness again. I'm not going to say everything happens for a reason, because that's garbage and we both know it. This is cruel and unfair, and I hate it with everything I am. But I am going to tell you this. You are enough. On the nights when William won't stop crying and you feel like you're failing and you wonder if he'd be better off with someone else, you are enough. On the days when the grief is so heavy you can barely get out of bed, you are enough. On the moments when you look at our son and wish with your whole heart that I was there instead of you, you are enough. You are always enough. Being William's father isn't something you have to earn. It's not something you can fail at by loving him too much or not knowing all the answers. It's just who you are. And you're going to be brilliant at it. I love you. I loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you from wherever I am now. And I love William with a fierceness that terrifies me. Take care of him. Take care of yourself. And when he's old enough to understand, tell him about me. Tell him I wanted to stay. Tell him I fought. Tell him that loving him was the best thing I ever did. Forever yours, Sarah. P.S. The bracelet isn't magic. It's just silver and sentiment. But babies know love when they feel it. William feels mine through that bracelet the same way he feels yours through everything you do. Don't overthink it. Just let him have this one small piece of me.
Matthew read the letter 3 times. By the 3rd time, tears were streaming down his face. He didn't bother wiping them away. Elena sat quietly beside him, not speaking, just present. Finally, Matthew folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. He looked at his son, still sleeping peacefully with the 2 big bracelets sliding down his arm. "I don't know if I believe in any of this," he said hoarsely. "I don't know if that bracelet is really making him sleep or if it's just coincidence." "Does it matter?" Elena asked. "He's sleeping. That's what matters." "How am I supposed to do this?" Matthew's voice broke. "How am I supposed to raise him without her? I don't know what I'm doing. I can barely keep myself together, let alone take care of a baby. What if I mess him up? What if I'm not enough?" "You're enough," Elena said firmly. "Sarah knew it. I know it. And one day, when you're not so deep in the grief, you'll know it too." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're going to make mistakes. Every parent does. You're going to have days where you want to quit, where you're so tired you can't think straight, where you wonder if you're doing anything right. That's normal. That's parenthood. It doesn't feel normal. It feels impossible. Most impossible things do, until suddenly they're just your life." The plane began its descent into Toronto. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their arrival time and the local weather. Passengers around them started gathering their belongings, checking phones, preparing to disembark. William slept through all of it. Matthew looked at Elena, this stranger who had kept a promise to his dying wife. This woman who had flown back and forth for 3 weeks just to hand him a bracelet and a letter. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know if what you did was right or wrong. I don't know if I should be grateful or angry, but thank you for keeping her promise, for finding me, for everything." Elena smiled. "You're welcome. And Matthew, one more thing. Sarah made me promise something else.
She made me promise that if I ever saw you looking like you were drowning, I'd throw you a lifeline. So here it is." She pulled out a business card and pressed it into his hand. "That's my number. If you ever need help, if William won't stop crying, or you're having a bad day, or you just need someone to talk to who knew Sarah at the end, call me. Anytime. I mean that." Matthew looked at the card. Elena Hartley, RN, Hospice Care Specialist, a London phone number. "You're in London. I'm in Toronto now. They invented international calling for a reason. Use it." The plane touched down with a gentle bump. The cabin erupted in the usual chaos of arrival. Overhead bins opening, passengers standing before the seatbelt sign turned off, the shuffle of bags and coats and impatience. Elena stood and retrieved her small carry-on from the overhead compartment. She looked down at Matthew and William one last time. "He's going to be okay," she said. "You both are. It doesn't feel like it now, but you will be." Then she was gone, disappearing into the stream of passengers, leaving Matthew alone with his sleeping son and a bracelet that should have been impossible. William slept all the way through customs. He slept through the baggage claim. He slept through the taxi ride to their new apartment in a neighborhood Matthew had only seen in photographs online. It wasn't until they were inside, in the small one-bedroom flat that Sarah would never see, that William finally woke up. He blinked up at Matthew, his eyes clear and calm. No crying, no fussing, just a soft coo and a yawn. Matthew lifted him out of the car seat and held him close. The bracelet was still on William's wrist, sliding down to his tiny hand. "Hey, buddy, we're home. Well, our new home. I know it's not what we planned. I know Mom was supposed to be here. But it's just you and me now, and we're gonna figure this out. Somehow. I promise." William made a small happy sound and grabbed at Matthew's face with his chubby fingers. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Matthew felt something other than crushing despair. He felt not hope, exactly, not yet, but maybe the possibility of hope, the knowledge that he wasn't completely alone, that Sarah had left him more than grief and memories. She'd left him her son, and a bracelet, and a letter that said he was enough. "I miss her," Matthew said to William, his voice thick. "I miss her so much it feels like I can't breathe sometimes. And I'm scared. I'm so scared I'm going to mess this up, that I'm not going to be what you need. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try so hard because I love you and because she loved you. And that has to be enough to get us through, right?" William just looked at him with those serious baby eyes, Sarah's eyes. Then he yawned again and snuggled into Matthew's chest. Matthew carried him to the bedroom. The apartment was mostly empty, just the basics he'd had shipped ahead. A crib, a dresser, a bed for himself, boxes everywhere, a whole life that needed unpacking. But that could wait. Right now, he just needed to get William settled. He changed William's diaper, got him into clean pajamas, and settled him into the crib. The bracelet was still on his wrist. Matthew thought about taking it off, but what if Elena was right? What if William needed it? What if it was the only thing keeping him calm? Matthew fastened it more securely, looping it around William's wrist twice so it wouldn't slide off. "Sleep well, little man," he whispered. "Your mom's watching over you. I know she is." He stood there for a long time, watching his son sleep. Then he went to the kitchen, made himself a cup of tea he didn't really want, and sat down at the small table by the window. Outside, Toronto was alive with evening traffic and city lights. Somewhere out there was their new life. Matthew pulled out Elena's business card and Sarah's letter. He read the letter again, slowly this time, letting each word sink in. "You are enough." Was he enough? He didn't feel like enough. He felt like a man barely holding on. But maybe that was enough for now. Maybe surviving was enough. Maybe loving William as fiercely as he could was enough. Maybe he didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to show up. Day after day. Night after night. Matthew picked up his phone. He looked at Elena's number on the card. Then he typed out a message. "This is Matthew. from the flight. I just wanted to say thank you again, and to let you know William is still sleeping. I don't know if it's the bracelet or just exhaustion, but either way, thank you for everything you did for Sarah, for everything you did for us." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The reply came almost immediately. "You're very welcome, Matthew. You're going to do beautifully. And remember, I'm here if you need me, anytime, day or night. You're not alone in this." Matthew felt that crack inside him widen, not breaking apart, but letting light in. He wasn't alone. He had William. He had Sarah's words. He had a stranger who'd kept a promise. That wasn't everything, but maybe it was enough to start. Matthew finished his tea. He checked on William one more time, still sleeping, the bracelet glinting in the soft light from the hallway. Then Matthew went to his own bed, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he slept. In the morning, William woke at 6, but he didn't scream. He just babbled softly until Matthew came to get him. And the bracelet stayed on his wrist for days, then weeks, then months. Matthew never took it off, and slowly, painfully, one impossible day at a time, they figured out how to live in their new life. The life without Sarah. The life that was just the two of them and a silver bracelet, and the knowledge that love doesn't end just because someone dies. It just changes shape. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it leaves something behind you can hold on to. Something small and silver and impossible. Something that reminds you that you're enough. Even when you don't believe it, even when it's hard, even when you're terrified, you're enough.